Parents, this is the exact 12-week system to help your teen score 1,500 or above on their next SAT. For those of you guys who don't know me yet, my name is Jared Nguyen. I'm the founder and director of Geometry Guru's SAT Prep. And at this point in my career, I've helped hundreds of students increase their SAT scores so that they can go to their dream colleges or qualify for scholarships. In every single video that I post, I give you guys one actionable step to increasing your teen's SAT score. With that being said, family, let's get straight into it. This is the exact roadmap that my students use to get past the 1,500 on every single SAT. And step number one is always what we call here the efficiency index. Now, so many students, they don't even know that they need to attack their weaknesses. And those that do know that they need to attack their weaknesses don't actually know how to target them. What do I mean by that? They'll take a diagnostic exam and they'll understand, hey, I got these questions wrong. They know what they got wrong, but they don't know why they got it wrong. So realistically, family, there's three reasons why a student would typically get something incorrect on the SAT. The first thing is pretty obvious. They don't understand the concepts. The second thing is they don't have the strategies or the timing techniques to finish the test on time, even though they do understand the concept. The third reason is that it was just a silly mistake. Or maybe because they're so fatigued from the earlier part of the exam, they're spending so much time on the early part of the exam, the easy problems, that by the time they get to the ending problems, they're making silly mistakes or they're just rushing through the exam. They don't have time to finish. Now, if you don't know exactly why you're getting something wrong, you may be overlooking certain weaknesses, or even worse, you might just be attacking weaknesses that aren't really even there. For example, if you already know that this is a silly mistake, why would you work on it? Right? It's not that you don't understand it. Or on the contrary, let's say you spend 90 seconds on a 30-second problem to get it correct. Is that still a strength? No, that's a weakness now because you're spending so much time on it. So the reason why step number one is so important is because you need to do a comprehensive diagnostic on exactly which of the 64 SAT concepts are you struggling with the most on, like which ones are actually weaknesses, what aren't weaknesses, and what are weaknesses that you didn't even know about. Okay, so that way, when you move on to step 2 and 3, you know exactly what you need to be targeting every single day. You don't waste time working on things that you shouldn't be working on. A lot of you guys are student athletes. A lot of you guys have people who are in extracurriculars. You do not have the luxury of spending 2-3 hours on SAT every single day. It's just not realistic for most parents. Step number 2 is what we call here the pressure protocol. Now, a lot of students, they have a lot of issues with test anxiety, or maybe they're taking way too long on these tests, right? That's exactly what step number 2 is for. Now we use real SAT problems that mimic the same types of problems that you're missing right now. But we make sure that they're slightly harder than the real thing, and we put it in a timed environment. Now, you combine hyper-targeting from step number 1, you combine that with the harder environment and the timing pressure, then you have a recipe for something that's going to help your test confidence immensely. Let me put it this way, family. If you do nothing for the next 12 weeks but work on your weaknesses, right, in a timed environment that is harder than the real SAT, how easy do you feel like the real thing is going to feel? It's going to feel way easier, right? Because you're practicing at a higher clip than you are in comparison to the real thing. All right. Step number 3 is where it all comes together, is what we call here the test simulation. So step 2 and step number 3 go together, except now instead of working on specific SAT weaknesses, now we work on the entire test as a whole. So many students, they just take one practice test, 2 practice tests, and that's it, right? Or even worse, they'll take practice test over practice test over practice test. They'll spam them, but they won't do step number 1 and 2. So with the test simulation, once we identify the weaknesses, once we attack the weaknesses, now we work the test holistically. We use tests that are slightly harder than the real thing. So then that way they could walk into the exam. They're just like, hey, I've done this a million times. You're clocking in, you're clocking out. It was easy, okay? Because so many students use the Blue Book exams, or they use other exams that are just way too easy for them. So what happens is that they score 1,500, 1,600 on a Blue Book exam, and by the time they take it to the real thing, they score 150, sometimes even more than 200 points worse than the way they did on the Blue Book exam. All right. Last but not least is the cadence. You've got to be consistent. All right. Now, this only works though if you're applying step number 1, step number 2, and step number 3. Okay. Once you finish step number 3, you go back to step number 1. All right. Now, The cadence you should be having is 40 problems a day, 5 days a week. That's 200 problems every single week for 12 weeks. You should be finishing out at about 2,400 problems. Now, you also need to do some sort of practice tests every single week. My students typically do practice tests, full-length practice tests, every other week. And in the weeks in between, they split up a practice test. They do the math portion in the beginning of the week and the English portion at the end of the week. The reason why we do this is because we want them to get used to the testing environment, right? But we don't want to burn them out. We don't want them to just spam practice exams. So that's why we break it up like that, all right? But this also gives us plenty of data so that we can go back to the efficiency index and start the whole process again, all right? All right, family, that's it for today's video. If you guys need help applying this for your teen's unique situation, go ahead and send me an email or send me a DM. I'd be more than happy to help you guys out. No obligations. Have a great rest of your day.